So we've started thinking today about new life, right? We've seen a baby just 6 weeks old, a new life, full of potential, full of possibility. I'd like us to also consider our own lives. You see, Jesus made this statement in John 10:10. The thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. The mission of Jesus was to bring you and I into abundant life. Other parties, including the devil himself, have the opposite objective, to reduce our lives. So let me unpack that for a moment. This might get interesting, one-handed. Here's abundant life. It says so right there. Okay, so that's abundant life. Abundant life, I would suggest, abundant life is experiencing the fullness of all that Jesus died to give you. It's growing and maturing in the Father's love. It's flourishing in the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. It's becoming clearer and surer in your identity as a well-loved son or daughter. It's discovering and growing in the gifts and graces that are over your life. It's being restored to a place or a state of shalom, the Hebrew word we usually translate as peace. But it's a much bigger word than peace. According to Strong's Concordance, shalom means this: completeness, wholeness, health, peace, welfare, safety, soundness, tranquility, prosperity, perfectness, fullness, rest, harmony, the absence of agitation or discord. If you were to build a wall and everything was lined up and in its place, there were no missing bricks, no cracks, nothing wrong, that wall would be in a state of shalom. Anything less than that was not shalom. However, it doesn't mean a trouble-free life. I mean, there are thieves trying to steal all of the above from you as well. So none of this is automatic. Not even for those who have been born again and become the children of God. So how do we enter into the abundant life and defend ourselves from the thieves? I'm glad you asked. First of all, don't be fooled by bait and switch. Bait and switch is the action, generally illegally, of advertising goods which are an apparent bargain with the intention of substituting inferior or more expensive goods. Quite often, that's how the enemy works. A very wise man once told me, Jesus takes to give, whereas the devil gives to take. Jesus takes to give, whereas the devil gives to take. Jesus says, lay down your life and follow me. The devil says, I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world as long as. So the thief comes along and he says, you don't want abundant life. You want this shiny life. You want this instead. This is, you can be anything you want to be. You can be anything you want to be. That's the cultural version. You don't want that, you want this. I mean, seriously, that's fantasy. That is illusion. That isn't even true of baby Eden. Even if Tyler and Bree were billionaires and they were willing to spend whatever it took, even then, Eden still can't be anything she wants to be. Not possible. It's not reality. What happens if Eden decides she wants to be on the USA women's volleyball team and she grows to the same height as Bree? It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not reality. This isn't how this thing actually works. Or what if she wants to be a marine biologist, but she's actually gifted as a musician or an artist? We can't be anything we want to be. I'm always saying this, we can be who God made us to be, or we can be frustrated. That's actually the choices. Everything else, doesn't exist. It's only that. All of us have limitations that are hardwired. How many of you know that? I mean, I could give you a list of things I'm really bad at. That I try to avoid if possible. I mean, a few months ago, Ali and I bought a new TV stand with like 830,000 pieces to it to put together. And it took about 3.5 hours. I did the whole thing along with Ali without cussing once, which I think is a record for me for putting something like that together, because I hate to do that. It's not something I'm gifted in. And again, honestly, it's super obvious that that's true, because if we could be anything we want to be, why do we have a celebrity culture? Which is basically dreaming that you're that person. I mean, if we could be anything we wanted to be, we'd have a lot more presidents of the United States. We'd have a lot more NFL quarterbacks, and we'd have a lot more rock stars. I looked at one website this week about the top 10 things young kids want to be when they grow up. Number 1, superhero. Number 2, celebrity. Number 3, doctor. Number 4, president. Number 5, teacher. Number 6, prince or princess. Number 7, astronaut. Number 8, chef. Number 9, policeman or policewoman. Number 10, Santa. I didn't write the list. We can't be anything we want to be. We have limitations. But we can be who we are and still experience abundant life. The next bait and switch is to offer you the American dream. So the American dream looks something like this. About half of it is inside the abundant life box, and about half of it is not. You know how this goes. The American dream. A beautiful spouse, 2.5 children. Tyler and Bree just overshot the runway. A large house with a white picket fence. A couple of flashy cars, and a loving pet. And it overlaps, like I said, it overlaps a little bit with the abundant life that Jesus came to give us, but it's mostly just about having stuff. So instead of full-blown fantasy being peddled to you, what's being peddled to you now is materialism. Have stuff, be happy. How's that working out for you? It doesn't cut it, does it? I mean, both of those two sound great, but they don't actually deliver. They're just dead ends. They are distractions, sideshows, detours from your actual story. So next, once you're feeling a little bit more depressed because numbers 1 and 2 haven't happened, the thieves come back around and they say, well, you can have this little bit here. That's ordinary life. And ordinary life is basically the same thing as the American dream, but with less stuff. So you have a smaller house, a smaller car, a smaller family, a smaller everything. And it's closer now to surviving than to thriving. And then along comes COVID. And so COVID says something like, you can have this little bit here. That's called a diminished life. A diminished life. It's ordinary life with all the hope and the joy sucked out of it. You're now treading water just hoping that a lifeboat's going to come in time. Come on, how many of you lived here at some point? Fantasy life, materialistic life, ordinary life, diminished life. Are you getting fed up yet? Are you starting to ask, can I have my abundant life back? If you do want it back, you have to start by saying no. No to all the other versions. No to the cultural expectations. I mean, listen, this is the journey we've gone on culturally in the last 40 years as I see it. You do it roughly in 20-year increments. We've gone from, I'm okay, you're okay, that's okay, to, I'm not okay, you're not okay, but that's okay. To, it's not okay for you to tell me you're okay, there should be something wrong with you. That is where we are currently residing right now culturally. You think I'm kidding? If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. If you're not offended, you have no conscience. If you're not traumatized, you're in denial. Our culture expects us to be outraged, offended, and traumatized with zero hope of recovery. I think I'll pass, thanks very much. I think I'll go for being countercultural. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. I like it even better in the J.B. Phillips translation. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold, but get remolded, but let God remold your minds from within. Don't let the world squeeze you into its own mold, but let God remold your minds from within. You see, all of what I've been talking about, all of that is all orphan thinking. None of it is befitting of well-loved sons and daughters of a good father. None of it. It either makes you selfish or it makes you a victim. Neither of those is remotely what Jesus has for you. What he died to give you. So we must have a plan which includes the healing of our hearts and the renewing of our minds. You know, yesterday's discipleship programs in churches don't work anymore. Do you know why they don't work? They don't work because they were created in an era where most people in the United States had a largely biblical perspective. And at a time when most people were reasonably emotionally healthy. That's gone. That is gone. Most people now do not have a basically biblical worldview. In fact, most Christians don't have anything remotely resembling a biblical worldview. And most people are carrying a ton of emotional baggage. So if we don't address the healing of the heart and the renewing of the mind, not much changes. Because the vehicle of change in our lives is not willpower. That's not what the world will tell you. How many of you have ever tried to do something? Like you have a bad habit and you said, I'm going to break that habit. I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm going to, whatever it is. And you did okay for a little while. And then you got ambushed by something emotionally. And what did you do? Right back to that habit again, right? Because we don't actually change by willpower. We change, according to the Bible, it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. When we experience the kindness of God, it changes our hearts. Why? Because we're comforted in the place of pain. And until we're comforted in the place of pain, we are not very strong when it comes to resisting all kinds of stupid things. So we have to start saying no. No to the cultural expectation to be all of those things. No to the cultural expectation that our thing is just to see how much money and stuff we can gather, how famous we can be. We have to start saying no to all of that. All of the bait and switch, more fame and more fortune, and no to the resigned surrender to less joy, less life. But then we need to say yes. We need to say yes. We need to say yes, but what do we need to say yes to? We need to say yes to the Father's voice and yes to the grace that is over our lives. Here's what I mean. All of us have limitations, actually quite a lot of them, but all of us also have gifts. We all carry grace. And embracing those gifts, embracing that grace, what that becomes is it becomes a doorway. This is now a door here. Comes a doorway back into abundant life. It's not the only door. There's other ways to come back into abundant life. But one of the main doors is coming into and embracing the grace that we carry and doing something with it. That's one of the main ways we come back into abundant life, because we're coming into touch with what we carry in the grace of God. But here's the problem. There are bouncers that stand next to that door to try to keep you out. They don't want you to come in. They want to keep you out. And those bouncers are very religious. They're very creative at giving you 1,000 different reasons why you're not good enough and your gifts don't matter and your grace is imagined. They will tell you you're not holy enough, not spiritual enough, not healthy enough, not educated enough, not something enough. Guarantee it. Then they'll tell you all the reasons why you're actually disqualified. I mean, they know your past and your weaknesses better than you do. They are very good at their evil job, and some of what they say is kind of true. But it's truth as the devil tells it, not truth as the Father sees it. It's truth as the devil tells it, not truth as the Father sees it. They'll do everything possible to keep you out of abundant life or restrict it as much as they can. So here's the deal. You can't walk in the grace on your life and apologize for it at the same time. You cannot walk in the grace that is on your life and apologize for it at the same time. Sooner or later, you have to own it, and you have to own it publicly. Just imagine that someone goes and studies dentistry, and ultimately they pass all their exams and they qualify as a dentist. But then they never tell anyone. They don't get a website, they don't get a business card, they don't open an office, they don't join a practice. The reality is they're unlikely to ever help anyone. And as I look around, I see gifts all over the place. And we did that exercise a couple of weeks ago and you named your garden. Most of you were in touch and could say, well, this is the grace on me. This is the grace on me. Talking about the same thing. Most of you have at least a couple things like that. And typically a gift is something you enjoy and you naturally do it well. You just do. You're good at it. It's fun. I mean, for example, how many of you have seen Breeze Photography on Facebook? It's really good, isn't it? How many of you have seen Denise's artwork, like the portrait she painted of Drew and Elizabeth recently?
Amazing.
Wasn't that great? But if neither Bree nor Denise owned their grace and named it, other people wouldn't be blessed, would they? Other people wouldn't be blessed. They wouldn't experience the joy of what they're good at, and the other person wouldn't experience the blessing of receiving what they're good at. In other words, life and healing and blessing wouldn't have flowed between one person and the next without the naming of the grace. Because abundant life is when you both receive life and you give it away. You receive the grace over you and you use it to bless someone else. Unless there's ownership, the grace doesn't happen. If Drew doesn't know that Denise paints, he never asks. Denise never paints. And there is no painting. And there is no transaction of abundant life between them. Are you tracking with me? Is this making some sense? We have to own the grace that's over our lives for it to bring joy to us and blessing to others. Let me give you a personal example, a recent one. So, most of you know I've been on a journey for a little over a decade now around becoming a spiritual father, being a dad to young adults and helping them grow spiritually. Actually, I remember at the beginning of the journey, it's probably about 12, 13 years ago, Erin and I went for a walk over the Arboretum and I was complaining to her saying, I don't want to be that generation yet. All those spiritual mothers and fathers and people who've influenced me in my life, they've all dropped off the map. I don't know where any of them are. They've died, they've retired, I've lost their phone number. I can't get a hold of any of them. And I don't want to be that generation yet. I vividly remember having this, well, it wasn't really a conversation, it was more of a monologue. I just sort of whined to her for about 20 minutes or something. But anyway. That's become one of my greatest delights. But even so, I still wasn't fully owning it. About a month ago, after reading a chapter of Tricia Frost's book, Experiencing the Father's Embrace Through Loss and Grief, I felt led to ask myself this question. Where have I agreed with the accuser rather than the Father in regard to myself? Where have I agreed with the accuser rather than the Father in regard to myself? Here's the first part of what I wrote in response to that question. I repent for having believed that I am a bad father. I have failed, sometimes badly. That's not my point. But I have consistently loved and tried my best for my family. I've often hugged them and told them I love you. I don't think any of my children think that I've been a bad dad. However, I have at times accepted the lies of the accuser through religious people that I am a failure as a father and by implication have no business whatsoever attempting to father anyone else. Despite not rejecting the shame and in fact receiving it, embracing it, the Father has drawn spiritual daughters and sons to me again and again. I am humbled by his evaluation of me, and now I choose to fully embrace it. I am a well-loved son who is becoming a father who loves well.
Amen.
You see, even once you enter through the door back into abundant life, those bouncers will follow you around and try to talk you back out again. That's what they do. They can't actually kick you out, but they try to bluff you that you don't belong where God has placed you. But my story's not over there. A few days after, about 5 or 6 days after, I got a message from a young African-American man, reached out to me and asked me, would I consider being a spiritual father to him? I'd only met him a couple of times, but I sensed in that the times I had met him that was going to happen. You see, during those race riots and protests of the past couple of years, I hold my head up and go, I don't know what the government should do. I don't have governmental type solutions. I don't know any laws that need to be written or unwritten or whatever. That's above my pay grade. But my prayer became, Father, enlarge my heart for the African American community. And then my prayer became, Father, give me an African American son. So here's the thing. I thought, however far back that was, about 8 months ago, when I met him, that he was going to ask that question to me. And I thought that 8-month time frame, I was waiting for him. I wasn't waiting for him. He was waiting for me. He was waiting for me to own it. He was waiting for me to say, I own this thing, the grace that you've put on me. Because as soon as I did that, within less than a week, he reached out to me, had no idea what had happened, reached out to me and said, I need a spiritual father, will you be one to me? So here's my point. Maybe you are waiting for something to happen which is actually waiting for you to do something first. Maybe you are the initiator of your own breakthrough. Because you respond to what the Lord is saying and you go with it rather than resisting. So, in a few minutes, I'm going to invite you to take a look at a little handout that has a few questions on it that hopefully will help you to own the grace that's on your life and take a step towards it.